Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump lashes out at the UN General Assembly, claiming he ended 7 wars while questioning its role in world affairs. Medical experts push back against Trump's claims that Tylenol is linked to autism, with some describing his comments as dangerous. And comedian Jimmy Kimmel's show is set to return tonight after a 6-day suspension over comments he made about conservative activist Charlie Kirk's assassination. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and media professional Emma Brain. Thanks for you to both be with us today. It's great to have you both on the show. And Emma, it's your first time, so we look forward to it greatly. But let's start now with Trump's speech at the UN General Assembly. Lots to discuss with you two both, of course, from the president accusing the UN of not living up to its potential, mocking its facilities, breaking and calling climate change a con job. Here's more of just what the president had to say earlier.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action.
Michael, I actually thought his comments were quite interesting today because, you know, so much was covered in that UN General Assembly speech. It was meant to be 15 minutes. It ended up 55 minutes, a really long speech, lots said. But what stood out to you most?
So I've said this before, and this is one of the areas where you and I actually agree. Donald Trump does a great job of recognizing and seeing things and pointing them out. His follow-through might not be the best. Yeah. And someone who's played tennis, you can appreciate a bad follow-through. I think he gets half of it right. Do we accept that the UN isn't as powerful as it once was? Absolutely. Do we accept that, as he said, the UN will write a strongly worded letter? Yes. And that's pretty much where it stops. Imagine, though, if instead of criticizing and ending it there, he were to actually come up with some solutions, some ways that the UN could be inspired to go forward. If the United States were to up its contributions to the UN, if they were to say, we want you to do more, we want you to take... Donald Trump doesn't want to be the policeman for Europe, for instance. He wants the Europeans to take care of a lot of what they're supposed to be taken care of, in his opinion, and rightly so. But if he were to sort of say to the UN, I want you to be more of the world's watchdog, then we'll support that.
And I do hear what you're saying. And Emma, I'm not sure what you think on that topic. But I do think we've also seen those big cuts to UNAID when Donald Trump tried to cut how big and ballooning America's payroll was and was highly frustrated about the amount of money America was sending to all different countries. And today I still think he was in attack mode when it came into the UN. He's probably thinking, I'm frustrated, I'm doing everything here. Why should I always come up with a compromise?
Very much so, and I totally agree with what Michael just said. He's very good at, and as you say, he was very aggressive in his speech, and he was very much on the attack at everybody else. But as Michael said, he's very good at picking fault with everyone else. But what is he doing? He has the power. He's the president of the United States of America. He actually has the power and the ability and the resources to solve a lot of these problems. And instead of pointing the finger at everybody else, he could actually resolve a lot of it. But he chooses not to for whatever reason. It's like the do as I do as I say, don't do as I do
and
mentality.
I guess, yeah, absolutely. And I guess that really came up when we look at the Russia war with Ukraine. He basically said it's India and China funding the Russian war machine. The European Union and NATO countries are still buying energy from Russia. They need to stop doing it before I sanction Putin. But hold on, the US is also buying $3 billion of energy plus per year from Russia. So it seems to be that real concept, do as I do, not as I say.
And as Emma said, I think that there's a lot of truth in this notion that he comes across with impressive statements, unaware that he's actually more powerful than the UN. So if he wanted to end the war in Gaza today, he could. If he wanted to impose sanctions on the Russians today, he could do that as well. He doesn't seem to recognize that he is the most powerful person who was at that General Assembly. Instead, he went from criticizing his predecessor, who he defeated in the last election, well, sort of, at least that ticket, Joe Biden, to the escalators at the UN, to attacking the Europeans and their immigration policy, to talking about so many domestic issues. For instance, he talked about how safe Washington, D.C. is right now. And traditionally, when a leader is standing up speaking at the UN, it's usually international issues that he or she will talk about. Donald Trump sort of just talked about everything he's been talking about for the past 7 months or so since he's been back in office.
Absolutely. But earlier, I actually spoke to Riyadh Kawaji, Al Arabiya's geopolitical security analyst, about how the US is becoming increasingly isolated from its allies when it comes to recognizing a Palestinian state. Take a listen to what he told me.
By linking the US stance to Israel, he is becoming isolated alongside Israel. I mean, this is something that's not good for the U.S. You know, this is the leader of the Western democracy to be in such a position. You have major Western powers like France, UK, Spain recognizing the Palestinian state. Right now, the U.S. is more and more finding itself among the minority side of the world when it comes to the Palestinian question.
And Emma, that is something that we've been hearing. America is becoming increasingly isolated from its allies in the West who now want to recognize a Palestinian state. Netanyahu is going to be traveling to this UN General Assembly on Friday. Do you think anything at all will come out of it? Do you think we'll see any pressure put on Israel by the president?
Unfortunately, I think we just seem to be going round and round in circles. I mean, you have an organization where one country can veto the vote of everyone else. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. And it seems to be like so many nations are now standing up and recognizing a Palestinian state, almost like a show of force against America. And it's like, you're going to have to take on the rest of us. But it's like a show of strength and unity to maybe try and force their hand. But I don't think it's going to make much difference, if I'm brutally honest, because Israel and the US are so intrinsically joined and that relationship is so strong. I think it's going to be very difficult to break that at any point.
I would actually say it's the United States and AIPAC, you know, the Israeli lobby group that's so intertwined, and Israel is just a beneficiary of that. There are so many Democrats and Republicans who take so much money from that one lobby group that Israel is allowed to get away with so much because you're not going to have American politicians criticizing the Israeli government.
And I think we're back to where we started, what Donald Trump did say. The UN talks about talks and nothing's really done. But I want to touch on migration because I thought it was quite interesting what he did say. European countries going to hell because of migration. I thought that was really strong language. And I do think in some respects he has a point. Illegal immigration has become a big topic within European countries. And once again, is Donald Trump trying to make a valid point, but he's just not landing the conversation correctly because it is a problem. problem?
I mean, look at what he's done in America with regards to illegal immigration. ICE is doing all the deportation and the rounding up and the detainments. He does have a point on that. And like in the UK, we've had the recent Unite the Kingdom protests and all the rest of it against, let's make it clear, against illegal immigration, not against immigration, because that would be ridiculous, quite frankly. He does have a point, and the countries, the European countries, do need to do something about it because it's a global problem. But I sit there and if I can have a personal opinion, it's like people need to be able to fix their home countries to have a home to stay in. Otherwise, these things wouldn't be happening. We get the economic migrants and all the rest of it. It's a global issue right now. What the solution is, I don't know, but we know it's a problem. But what is the solution to the problem?
And I think Donald Trump didn't give any solutions when we were watching that speech today, but so many governments before the government we have now in place in the UK and various other countries have tried to get the illegal migration issue under control, and they just can't.
Yeah, it is, just as Emma said, it's one of the issues where you want the home country to be able to sort out its situation. Yeah. But when the home country has been invaded, or when there's a civil war, and then people who want no part of the dying are then left to fend for themselves, they flee to safer ground, safer territory, safer countries. And as a country that is in a safe place, what is it that that country is supposed to do? And this is where I think we almost have to throw the policy out the door, and we have to come up with what is the solution for any country that's going to be dealing with an influx of immigrants, illegal immigrants. That is where I don't know that enough people have open, transparent conversations with the populace to say, this is an issue, we need solutions, but building a wall, for instance, in the United States is not the answer. Rounding up everybody at Home Depot is not the answer. There has to be a more humane way, and maybe this is my personal leftist point of view, sorry, Leigh-Ann. This is where I think these situations have to somehow, the conversations have to focus on the people rather than our policy is to, as Stephen Miller said, we want to deport 3 million people a year. That's just not realistic, and it's also putting the ICE agents in harm's way, and I think it's scaring so many people who've been in the States in some cases for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And I do think his comments on climate change were very interesting, and he went on about climate change quite a lot. He said it's the greatest con job, and it was all a green scam. Once again, I do think he was trying to make the point that green energy is extremely expensive. It's something we need to look at. Many people have said this, but once again, it just didn't quite land correctly. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people will be outraged by this because scientists do say climate change is real, and now we're getting another point of view. And we talk about migration, and a lot of that could be put down to climate change in certain regions where they're now seeing flooding and things have changed.
Yeah, I think if you look at the flooding that went on in Pakistan over the last couple of months, and you had so many people who were they were losing their crops, they were losing their livelihood, they were losing their farms, and they not only had to flee their land, but they had to make their way to a safer area and figure out how to make a fresh start of it. So there are truths to climate change, 100%. Donald Trump seems to, again, not recognize that there is, one of the things that I've often talked about with colleagues is you can come with all the criticism you want, but you have to come with some solutions. They don't have to be the solutions that we take, but you have to make some suggestions. And that's where I think he falls flat, and that's where I think he hurts himself, where if he put forth the idea that climate change is a con, but then he had solutions. I also believe, and this is my last point on the matter, is that he comes from a different generation, where sometimes when he was in Scotland a couple of months ago, and he was playing golf, and he talked about the wind farms.
And North Sea oil.
Yes, and he talked about aesthetically how they look so unattractive. I think that that's from a generation that thinks about how things look. I think I have kids who are 29, and they see things in a very different way. They see something like that as utilitarian, making perfect sense, and the aesthetics are secondary, where I don't know that Donald Trump sees it that way.
And I don't know what your thoughts on it are, because is he just basically saying, drill, baby, but drill?
Yeah.
We know that's what he wants to do. It's all financial. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, Emma.
I mean, look, when he says countries need to rely on traditional energy sources, oil, gas, and all the rest of it, you have to bear in mind that most of these guys are invested in those energy sources. So, of course, they're going to want to vouch for that. But he's also correct when he says you have all these high-profile climate activists that go to all these summits and conventions and all the rest of it, and then they get on their private jet and go home. So they're not helping the issue. However, a point that I wanted to bring up that I didn't think of earlier, but it's popped into my brain, is when we talk about things, it encourages innovation and looking for alternatives. We wouldn't have had the rise in biofuels that we have now. We wouldn't have had the rise in electric alternatives that we have now. So it does lend itself to pushing innovation and invention and finding new ways to do things on that front. But again, I think he's, as Michael said, he's very old school in the way he looks at things, and there are alternatives. Is it a con? We'll have to wait and see. It might be down the line, but you look at the ozone layer. Everyone panicked about that. I was reading an article just yesterday that said the ozone layer is virtually healed itself now. So time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. But there were also some quite amusing moments. There were funny moments, I would say. We can't not say Donald Trump is about showbiz. He is the TV personality. He is actually somewhat amusing.
He is, and there were a few funny moments. The poor escalator broke down on him trying to get to the conference, and the comment that, for me, that did it was he basically said, if the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but we're both in great shape. And then the teleprompter broke down, but one of the funny things for me was Emmanuel Macron, who was stuck outside behind the barriers as Trump's motorcade went past, and he literally said to the security guy, I'm going to call him. Hello, I'm stuck outside. You need to get me in. It's because of you. I'm stuck outside.
I mean, you can't make it up with Donald Trump, can you? And I also thought it was quite interesting. He said he could have done the refurbishment of the UN General Assembly building better than it has been done. And he basically said it was a failure because the escalator broke down. He would have put marble floors and mahogany walls on if he had been given the job.
And the escalator would have been gold.
Yes, indeed, it would have been, like the one in Trump Tower. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to our next story now, and Trump's unproven claims that Tylenol is linked to autism, which has been heavily criticised by the medical professionals around the world. Emma, let's talk about this, because this story was announced yesterday, but I really feel like it's gathered a lot of pace today, and we've seen a lot of talk of it on social media and all the news networks. So what claims has the president made? And now, how are medical professionals reacting to these claims?
So Trump has basically claimed that taking Tylenol or paracetamol, as the rest of us call it, is no good, and that pregnant women should fight like hell to only take it in cases of extreme fever, and that it's causing the rise in autism in children. Medical professionals are obviously coming out in their droves and refuting this, going, what are you talking about? I did do a bit of research. There has been some studies in the past that say there might be a link, but there's no foregone conclusion. I mean, the first thing in pregnant women, if you have a high fever, the doctor will give you paracetamol to get the fever under control. And the interesting thing was, before Trump came out with this claim and this warning, Tylenol's shares dropped by 7-point-something%. After he made this, it rebounded by 6.2%, which is very strange market behavior, to be honest with you. But again, are these dangerous claims to be making, and are you just going to be causing panic, especially amongst women when they're at the most vulnerable time in their life? It's stressful enough to deal with pregnancy and all the things that go with it and everything that's going through your head. To have to worry about something like this and to have the most powerful man in the world saying things like this, it's worrying, to say the least.
Yeah, it is worrying. And, you know, one of the accusations that was thrown at him was, why now? You know, there was no new data. And it begs the question, especially if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're wondering what's going on, what am I missing? Why is the president, with the health secretary behind him, standing up and talking about what pregnant women should be taking when they're not feeling well? And that's where one of the issues that I think raised some flags for people.
I do think, though, was it last week I was listening to a speech and they did say that they were going to give this announcement on what they think is causing autism. Yeah. So it was trailed when it comes to the Trump administration, because I think we do see the health secretary, he's been quite controversial within his points of views, and they want to make America healthy again, and they feel like there is this autism spread. There's been huge numbers of people diagnosed with it, and they want to try and find the answer.
But is that just because awareness and testing is better than it is before? I mean, more women in perimenopause are being diagnosed with ADHD. They added Asperger's to the autism spectrum. I mean, the spectrum is huge when it comes to autism. Sorry. And as I said, the testing at each stage of the spectrum, from what I've read, is the same. There's no differentiation in that. So is it just the awareness is there now that we see more of it?
Yeah, I also think that the Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., seems to be, I don't want to say obsessed, that seems too strong a word, but he seems awfully preoccupied with the issue of autism. Not to downplay it for those families that are dealing with it. It can be a serious issue, but it's something that he's gone on about for a long time. And it's one of the main issues that people criticize him about when they look at him as maybe not the ideal health secretary candidate.
But you remember when we did see him go through the Senate, he was really grilled, and he did get in to Donald Trump's cabinet. We mustn't forget that. And it was quite controversial, though, at the beginning. But he has made his mission to tackle chronic illness in the US, and he's called it an autism epidemic. But my big question here is, once again, it's unfounded. And how scary is it for the rest of the world to be listening to this? And it could possibly be misinformation.
I mean, and when words like epidemic are used, it makes it sound like a contagious disease, not a cognitive learning disability, which is effectively what it is. And like I said, the spectrum is so big. And I actually think the kind, and I am going to call it scaremongering, is terrifying for parents of autistic children or people with autism, because they have enough to deal with as it is. And I also feel it's a little bit derogatory for them too.
I thought today and yesterday when I was listening to this, I almost felt like they were making out that it was man-made autism, like it was the fault of the mother in a way for taking this, more than it was the fact that it's actually to do with lots of different factors. Someone explained. I don't know what you thought.
Well, sometimes it comes down...
More genetic.
Yes, I was just going to say that word. Sometimes it comes down to genetics, that people, you know, you cannot predict every ailment that a child is going to have during his or her life, or when that child is born. But Robert Kennedy Jr. has not the best reputation in health circles. You know, he called the COVID-19 vaccine the deadliest vaccine ever manufactured. He's linked fluoride to bone cancer and to IQ loss. He's promoted debunked medical theories. And yet when he came into before the Senate, he was asked, you know, he talked about how his department was supposed to be unbiased, and it was supposed to be politics-free, and it was supposed to be transparent, and it was supposed to be science-based. And unfortunately, this administration, from the top right down to all the people in the cabinet, don't seem to feel comfortable saying, I don't know the answer to that question yet. Instead, they try to come up with an answer that they think, in my opinion, the president will want to hear.
But I do find some things that Robert Kennedy Jr. is trying to do quite interesting. He's trying to make America healthy again. And I do think that he's really trying to get rid of artificial additives in a lot of the food in America, which I find fascinating because in European countries, they don't have nearly as much. And we had a conversation about it. They really cracked down on E-numbers. Yeah. So maybe this will be a positive move from him.
I mean, look, yes, across Europe for years, E-numbers have been banned or reduced, fake flavorings, all the added sugars, preservatives and things like that are not allowed in a lot of foods because of the problems that it causes. And it's quite astounding that America's a little bit behind on that. A lot behind. I was being polite.
But I think we all know people who are I'm from Canada, people from Canada or the States, and they can't eat certain products. And then they go to Europe and they eat all the pizza they want in Italy. Yeah. You know, because I think the European standards are very different and their approach is very different. In America, the idea seems to be that it has to look very appealing on the plate, which means colors have to maybe pop a little bit more than in other countries. And they also want to mass produce, which means that you need a certain number of pesticides during the growing process to make sure that you're getting as much as you possibly can out of your crop. And that, I think, then has detrimental effects for the end user.
It does, but I think one thing they need to address, and it's always the same thing that comes up, healthier food needs to be cheaper.
Yes.
It's cheaper to eat unhealthy than it is to eat healthy, and it's just a sad fact.
And it also takes more time to prepare something from scratch, so they need to come up with ideas to tackle that. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that conversation. We'll back with you in just a moment's time now. And Super Typhoon Ragasa is barreling towards Hong Kong and southern China, bringing with it hurricane-force winds with speeds of up to 230 kilometers an hour and torrential rains. Some 400,000 people in the neighboring Chinese city of Shenzhen have been told to evacuate. Kimmel is in Hong Kong and has the story.
The worst of the storm is expected to hit Hong Kong in the early hours of Wednesday. That's when the winds are expected to be at their peak intensity. And after that, there will be storm surges. That's when the storm forces the sea level up. There could be surges of up to 2 meters in most coastal areas. That's areas like just behind me in the very center of Hong Kong Island. And there are shops just down the road that have been boarding their shops up and using sandbags to protect themselves for what could be a significant rise in sea level. Parts of the territory could see surges of up to 4 meters. And while Hong Kong is used to typhoons that are really high wind speeds, when the ocean level rises, when there are these surges, that is much harder to prepare for. There's just not very much that you can do against that kind of rapid sea level rise. And the Hong Kong government has warned that flooding is expected not just because of the sea rise, but also because of heavy rains and flying debris that will then clog up storm drains. During typhoons such as these, there aren't teams that can then go and unblock those drains, and that is just a given, according to the Hong Kong authorities, that there will be flash flooding, that there is nothing more that they can do to prevent those types of floods. Essentially, tens of millions of people are putting life on pause for the time that this typhoon sweeps through. Now, these storms are getting more and more frequent. While typhoons are common in Hong Kong, super typhoons are not. Over a 50-year period from the 1950s through to 2008, Hong Kong saw 4 super typhoons. From 2017 up until now, we've seen 4, including Ragasa. That means within less than a decade, Hong Kong has had 50 years worth of super typhoons. The UN has warned that that type of increase in frequency is a direct result of climate change, and it's going to be more and more common for both Hong Kong and the whole of southern China.
Now we're turning our attention to comedian Jimmy Kimmel, whose show is set to return tonight after a 6-day suspension over comments he made about conservative activist Charlie Kirk's assassination. Michael, wow, whirlwind week for Jimmy Kimmel. Everyone was following the story. It was gaining so much momentum. Back on telly so soon? Did you expect this?
I didn't expect it, not for the first 24 hours after. I thought the environment in which Jimmy Kimmel spoke was not the healthiest for conservatives or for liberals. And conservatives are in power, and I think that they were, especially with the death of somebody that in many cases was a friend, and I think that they were not going to relent. But then I think they shot themselves, and maybe that's a bad pun, I don't mean that. They turned what was a situation to their advantage, and they made it favorable for Jimmy Kimmel, because Brendan Carr, who's the FCC chairman, went on a podcast and he said, ABC and Disney can either do this the easy way or the hard way, intimating that if they don't keep Jimmy off the air, then there will be repercussions. And that was, I think, when Disney subscriptions started to be canceled, when artists, actors, Hollywood stars spoke out. These are, of course, people that Disney needs to work with. And I think that that's when the Disney stocks started to tumble. And that's, I think, where it turned a little bit and people started to cite the First Amendment as a reason why we can't allow this to happen, because you had the president and you had the FCC chairman who were both making comments that were so against the idea of free speech. And that's where I think most Americans took a stand.
What I find quite interesting is I spoke to Republicans on the show about this exact topic, about Jimmy Kimmel, and they said to me it was actually nothing to do with the president, nothing to do with the Trump administration. It was solely ABC who made this decision on their own because they felt that the remarks by Kimmel were ill-timed and he didn't want to come onto the show and apologize and tone down his rhetoric against MAGA, and they were worried about how the country was feeling at that time. After the murder of Charlie Kirk, a lot of people felt like we were on a little bit of a precipice. I'm not sure what you guys think.
So I just want to say, but this is also the same ABC that paid Donald Trump $16 million to settle the George Stephanopoulos lawsuit. You don't need everything to be overt to know that there's trouble if you don't agree with the boss.
But I'm just saying, that's what Donald Trump and the Republicans will say.
And I say that that's BS.
Okay. Emma, thoughts?
I mean, look, when you're living in the country that professes that everyone should be able to have free speech, I kind of agree that free speech to a point until you offend somebody else, right? That's what I think. But however, the people stood up and said, we don't like this. And when you have people like Cynthia Nixon on TikTok holding up her tablet, literally going, here's me canceling my account. Disney lost nearly $5 billion in days. And it's not just subscriptions. People were saying we're going to boycott the theme parks, the movies, the merchandise, literally everything. When you're looking at basically destroying a corporation, the people have spoken, and you kind of have to listen to them at that point.
And that's one thing I thought. It was people power here.
Yeah, it was.
That won the day, and also money, because no one wants to lose that much money, and I'll tell you, Disney doesn't want to at this time. I don't know. So we've got Glenn Powell. He'll be Kimmel's guest on the show tonight. Will you be watching? Do you think he's going to get great ratings?
I won't be watching. And I think he will get good ratings. But I think the real popularity will be on the clips that are on social media. And that's where, if I'm going to watch any of the night talk shows, it's usually somewhere on YouTube, and I'll just watch the clips that I want to watch.
I think that people will watch it to see what he has to say. Is he just going to stay stum, go, hey, I'm back, let's put that in the past and move on and get on with it? Or is he just going to carry on and say what he needs to say?
And what's interesting is some ABC affiliates won't be airing the show. And I found that actually quite telling in a way, because not everyone is in favour of this return. And we can't forget that, yes, a lot of people have spoken out and they cancelled their Disney subscriptions, but there's still anger over the way that people have spoken about Charlie Kirk's assassination online, on X. We've seen this over in the States.
Yeah, I think people love comedians until they say something that maybe hits a little bit too close to home.
Yeah.
And I think in this particular case, if you were a fan or a believer in the work that Charlie Kirk was doing, and a comedian comes out and says something that you, as you're dealing with your own grieving process, says something that you think is offensive, it's going to be tough, I think, for that person to come back around to forgiving or watching Jimmy Kimmel again. And the two companies that are responsible for carrying Jimmy Kimmel in many parts of the States, ABC affiliates, you know, they have made this decision that for them, probably from a business point of view, because they know their audience, Jimmy Kimmel is not somebody that they're going to want to see. So I don't think they're going to be going against the idea of what the majority of their customers want. I think they're going to be leaning into what they'll see as good business decisions.
Mm-hmm. And I hate to say it, but we kind of live in a world today where cancel culture is rife. It happens a lot. At the end of the day, you have so many other channels, so many other people to watch. If you don't like something, just change the channel or watch something else. It's really that easy. People have short-term memories. They can forget. It's the social media and the repeating the clips, as you were saying, that keeps it going these days. But Kimmel will be fine, and if the people that love him will watch, and the people that don't will move on to something else.
But it is once again the hot topic that has been dominating. And Kimmel, Michael, you said only missed 3 shows essentially. So you know what? He's just had a little hiatus, and he'll be back. Hopefully his jokes will be a bit better. But thank you for your comments on that. And now it's that time of the show where Michael and Emma tell us their stories of the day. And Michael, yours is all about a competition, and it involves bears. What's up?
So I would have said it's a competition to determine the fattest, because that
Is that politically correct?
Well, in this particular case, I would say it is, because what we want are brown bears in Alaska to become as fat as possible so that they can go in the hibernation season. And they can be in a, because of the very harsh winters in Alaska, they're then in a great position to come out after hibernation in fantastic shape. I'll tell you a couple of fun facts first. So, midsummer, you're going to have a brown bear that's going to weigh anywhere from 700 to 900 pounds. Whoa. By the end of September, beginning of October, they'll get up to 1,000. Sometimes they'll even get up to 1,400 pounds. Now, what we have is you can go to, starting today, www.fatbearweek.org, where you can vote for who you think is, and it doesn't have to be the fattest, it could be the cutest, it could be the brown bear that you find the most attractive, and you get to vote. And what happens is the park rangers have brackets each day. So they'll have one bear against another, and then people go on and vote. Last year, they had 1.2 million voters online, and you get to also, because the bears are live streamed, so you can see what they're like. They have their own Spotify playlist, and number 73 on that Spotify playlist is Carole King's I Feel the Earth Move. And what they're trying to do is let everybody know that these bears are massive, and everybody has an opportunity. This crazy voting contest started in 2014 just as a one-day sort of event. But I think with everything that you have going on in Gaza and in the Ukraine, it's kind of like a bit of a nice reprieve and something that's a little bit different.
And it's quite educational,
Yeah, I love
because
that.
I actually didn't know all of that until you just told me that bears eat a lot, then they go into hibernation. It's absolutely fascinating. And I don't know if you knew, but I actually knew nothing about bears.
It's interesting you say that, because AP reported this story, and what's happened is because of the the interest and the way that you can attract people to this, it's in schools now. And kids are learning about the whole process of hibernation and everything that bears go through during, a winter cycle.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And Emma, you also have an animal story, but yours is actually about a man and his camel, and he's on this really long, epic journey, and it's all about promoting peace. What do we know?
He is. So it's a Yemeni gentleman called Munir El-Dahmi, and he's basically ridden a camel from Yemen all the way through to the UAE, and that's about 3,500 kilometers he's done so far on his camel. It's taken him months because he got stuck in Saudi Arabia for 8 months dealing with all the visas and the paperwork and everything for him and his camel. And he's been in the UAE for a week or so now, and he's had amazing responses from everyone everywhere he goes. Emiratis gifted him some camels as well. And basically, I loved this quote from him. He basically said, "I'm riding the ship of the desert to the land of the astronauts."
Yeah,
which is really nice.
It's amazing. And I also thought of The Alchemist, the book The Alchemist. I don't know why that came across my mind, but these epic journeys and pilgrimages that people do to bring people together. It's quite inspiring.
It's not, and so what he's done, this isn't the first ride he's done. He did it about 10 years ago across Africa. So he rode across Africa on camels as well, kind of to show the Arabian culture and to people that have never seen a camel before, because they're incredibly fascinating animals. And his next journey, he's going to go from the UAE to Kuwait. So he'll be going through Qatar and Kuwait. And then his end goal is he wants to ride across Europe on the camel to show the Arabian culture. And basically, he's spreading peace across the world with his camel and bringing joy to people.
And you ride camels.
I do.
How difficult is it to be on a camel for that long? Because it's got to hurt at some point.
They're very different to horses. I mean, I did the UAE camel trek, which was 550 kilometers over 12 days from the empty quarter in Liwa to Global Village in Dubai. And they're not the most comfortable animals in the world.
But they are quite gentle.
They're very intelligent, they're very empathetic, and always have treats.
Oh, I love that. There we are. So from bears to camels, that was absolutely brilliant, fascinating. Thank you so much for those stories. And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to our guest, Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and media professional Emma Brain. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. G&T will be coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.